This video is brought to you by HalloCasa. Our tool transforms independent local real estate agents to global real estate agents. Create your own profile for free and get contacted by international investors. Sign up with the link in the description. Hello and welcome everyone to our 217th session of HalloCasa. My name is Michael and today I'm talking to Peter Schravemade, one of the most influential voices in Proptech and real estate innovation across the Asia-Pacific region, but also definitely internationally. Peter is the Managing Director for Reach Australia and New Zealand, where he leads the Accelerator's mission to drive growth and entrepreneurship for some of the most exciting real estate technology companies in the region. He also serves as the Vice President of the Proptech Association of Australia, advising stakeholders, building networks, and shaping the future of Proptech. In addition, Peter is a member of the Forbes Business Development Council and continues to mentor globally through Reach Canada, and US, and other international accelerators. Before this, Peter played a key role at boxbrownie.com, where he was the global director of sales, marketing, and revenue, helping the company grow into a global leader in property marketing solutions. His professional journey also includes 2 decades in real estate sales, brokerage ownership, commercial leasing, property management, and even ventures in hotels, consulting, and entrepreneurship. Beyond these operational roles, Peter is a highly sought-after speaker and consultant, having presented at industry-defining conferences like Inman Connect, MIPIM, and NAR events, while his insights have been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and Inman News. Peter, thank you so much for your time. And first question, directly, because I already gave a bit of an intro. What drives you?
Thanks for having me, Michael. I'm very impressed you got your way all the way through that really long intro. What drives me? A challenge, actually, if I'm honest. I really enjoy a challenge. So if there is a problem that needs to be solved, generally, and if you draw a thread through my career, most of my role is problem solving. If in a nutshell, I know it's a fairly easy answer. The moment I'm not being challenged is the moment that I will go and find another challenge. I get bored very quickly, so I do enjoy a challenge.
So what is the problem you're solving right now?
I've got lots of problems, and not a lot of them are mine. If I'm honest, I'm fairly, I wouldn't say detached, but I oversee, or as the managing partner for Reach Australia and New Zealand, we have about 46, and we're about to have 50 companies in our stable, meaning that we have a stake in these companies or a share in these companies. And there is not a day that goes by with that volume of companies that there is not a problem that's being presented and asked, what's your opinion on this and how do you sort of move forward with it? And because Australia and New Zealand was the first ever Reach program outside of the US, we are the second largest by volume of alumni companies that we have attached. And so we pride ourselves on fostering a community here in Australia where the current companies, the current crop that we have, and the companies that have come before, we actually maintain contact with them unlike any other accelerator before. They are invited to all of our conferences. They are personal friends, most of them. So I would say that I have more challenges at this stage of my life than I've ever had before. And it's a leading reason as to why I really like this gig, and I feel like I'm naturally suited to it.
Is that also what you're implicitly referring to when I read your LinkedIn posts regarding the network in real estate is almost everything?
Yeah, yes, yeah. I stand by the fact that good products sometimes never make it, and it's not because of the product. It's because of the fact that they haven't developed a human aspect to the go forward or the go to market strategy. And there can be lots of elements to that. Sometimes they haven't considered what the actual market's doing. Sometimes they haven't considered how they're communicating that product. But the human aspect to technology is quite often ignored by startups, scale-ups, even enterprise get it wrong. I would even argue that legacy companies that have been around and highly successful, fall over when they ignore the human aspect of property technology. And so we're quite passionate here about grounding the companies that we deal with and saying, you know what, you can have the best product in the world, but a mediocre to average product is likely to beat you if there's a human aspect to that product. We have one in our stable house at the moment who is against two, actually, if I'm honest, against very, very competitive, a very, very competitive market full of competitors in the areas that they are. And they are both winning based on culture, on their ability to communicate that product, and on the human aspect, which is the relationship. And as soon as you ignore the relationship from a tech perspective, you're as good as dead as far as I'm concerned. And it may not happen straight away, but over a period of time, you'll go forward in some way, shape, or form.
I fully agree, especially in the area of AI. I believe you have to go back even stronger to shaking hands and understanding the human aspect, and only use tech as a medium in order to leverage or solve problems which are human based. How did you do that with Box Brownie? Did you also learn that there the hard way? You tried it maybe first and it didn't work, and then you rewind it? Or do you use your blueprint from there, your success story, and say, listen, I got the Holy Grail. Listen to me, I'll tell you, and I can basically teach you how to do it properly.
Well, there's a lot that can be taken from that Box Brownie story. To date, I don't think the approach was completely not unique, but very, very tech that is out there has what I call a top-down approach, where they are approaching franchise heads or associations or MLSs, and they want to sell to the lowest amount of people, but to maximize their return. So they will go after, let's say they go after a Remax, 380 odd thousand agents. You know, they'll go after them and think, look, we get them all on board, so happy days. The approach for Box Brownie, and there was only one other company that I could say had done this, to my knowledge, and it was a company called BombBomb, a video company in the US. But our approach was both top down and grassroots. So the harder approach in a go-to-market strategy is a grassroots approach, where you really need to win the hearts and minds of the agents. It's the most powerful, in my opinion, because it doesn't really matter what the franchise, you know, if a franchise said, no, we're not going to look at you, it makes them look particularly stupid when over 50% of their users are actually using your service. And it looks even worse when they get a faux competitor or somebody that might compete with your product in. It actually just annoys their franchisors. So, I would go as far to say that the approach was incredibly complex, that we took to the US and to the other countries that we went into. But particularly, most people are interested in the US when they talk to me. You know, how did we disseminate that, and how did we execute on that? And the difference between talking about it and executing it is incredibly difficult. It's very hard, but with the right team, it can be done. Absolutely.
Have you ever done the exercise of mapping users versus decision makers versus who has the budget and who pays on a local or also even worldwide agnostic level?
Absolutely, but that's product dependent. So that depends on the product, the stage of the funnel that you're at. With Box Brownie, we're at the front of the funnel. It was there could be multiple decision makers in there, but we'd identify who they were product by product. And that's probably an even more difficult question, because a lot of people who have a software, they might have 3 or 4 products, and those products appeal to different target audiences. And I find that not a lot of tech companies have actually sat down and gone, who are the target audiences for this specific product? How do we then reach them? What's the lowest path to getting this product in front of them and actually leading to a sale, and in multiple divisions? So, with Box Brownie, we had we had nearly 45, I think 45 to 50 products. And we had mapped every single one of them, not just by target audience, but target audience by geographical location, which might be country, it could be continent. And we had absolutely, I think I had something like 180 different responses to a person based on who they were, where they came from, and what they did. And understanding the fit, so going from target audience to product of relevance to pitch is incredibly difficult. At all of the accelerators and the incubators I've ever seen, they teach you about a 30-second elevator pitch. And for my money, that's absolute bullshit. There's not just one 30-second elevator pitch. If you go and spew that out time and time again, you are missing elements of your target audience. So when you're coming to pitch, the most important thing is understanding who the hell it is in front of you. So, Michael, if we met in an elevator and you said, "What is it that you do?" I would go, What do you do?" And you would tell me, "This is what I did." And here is how Box Brownie or insert your company solves a problem for people in your shoes or companies in your area, or the type of demographic that we're talking about. And I really feel as though the art of marketing, if you want to call it the art of go-to market, it's not complex. It can be time consuming, but it's really getting the bones of that down and ensuring that you're able to communicate it in a human aspect in real terms is vitally important.
Yeah, nowadays we call it ideal customer profile, ICP, and
or personas. I've heard personas thrown in there. Yes, but yeah, that is exactly what.
And we take, let's say, we take a square or even a cubicle, and we map our positioning, and we say, okay, this is the profile, this is the persona, this is the geo, and maybe even this is the organizational structure. I sell to a psychiatrist in a hospital is maybe different than a psychiatrist, but he is self-employed and he has his own practice.
Yeah, and probably the other thing I'd add to that, Michael, is equally the hardest part is, like, I could do this all on my own, but then what are our customer service saying when people call up and they speak to one of these personas? So the harder part is not just identifying them. The harder part is then unleashing that across your business and having your salespersons understand, your customer service, your back end understand, even the people who are in R&D understand what is it that drives these particular demographics, because that might help them guide which of the next products should be triaged to number 1 as opposed to 20.
Let's talk about reach overall. For someone who has never heard about it, give us an overview. What's the purpose? Why do you exist?
Yeah, well, we exist because of Second Century Ventures, and Second Century Ventures, as far as I'm aware, is the highest by number investor in any kind of prop tech. And what I mean by number, I think there are other venture capitals out there that will invest more money, but higher by number, meaning that every year we invest in, I'd say it's over 100 now, different prop techs. It's the only venture capital fund that I'm aware of that does volumes like that. They're insane volumes. What Second Century Ventures realized very early on is that it's not good enough to simply cut a check and hope that the prop tech does well. And I think that was largely the strategy in very early days, is we'll cut a check. Yeah, we'll introduce these parts to anyone that we can that, comes along. But I think it became very evident early on that the chance of success, and this is probably the reason and the secret behind the REACH program, the chances of success of a property technology actually moving forward and putting itself. My challenge is to put every prop tech in an indefensible space, one that they have a pathway to profitability, and make them last on their own bat. And how they move forward, then we can support that as part of that. But a large portion of why the REACH programs exist is that we've identified that not only is it good for the money that we, Second Century Ventures, have invested to actually bolster the programs, but it's actually better for the actual company themselves, the owners of that company, and the community. In fact, I can't see a negative of anyone receiving money from a reach program and then sitting through an accelerator program, which inherently will allow growth in some way, shape, or form. And even if there's only one thing that we do for that company in the accelerator program, that one thing is better than them not having sat through it. So, but there's so many things that we do. We have mentorship, we have education, we have. I think the biggest underlying advantage of the Reach program is that you are now a common shareholder with about 400 other companies around the world. And if you get all of those companies in the room, which by the way is happening in Nashville of next week, it is amazing what happens. Number one, you learn that the problems that you're having are the same as the problems that people might be having in Israel or Latin America or Canada or the UK. And you speak to owners and founders who've been there and done it before, and they've solved for those problems. So not only are we doing it that way, but then there's potential integration. So if you can imagine an idea that's coming out of Australia might be it might be ideal for somebody who's never seen that in America, and is also in, let's say, the property management space, and all of a sudden these integrations are happening. And so I think one of the massive advantages of the Reach program is the community that you inherit as a result of being a part of it. But in a nutshell, that's what we do. We run an accelerator program alongside a venture capital fund in order to not only bolster the investment we've made, but move the companies forward in a meaningful way.
You mentioned defensibility before, and you just shouted out so fast. But I'm aware that you know how much granular effort and work there is in order to achieve that, especially in real estate. And I don't know, you know about defensibility from all the startup books and the wisdom of network effects, of creating maybe a closed ecosystem, and all the theories around there. In real estate, also talking global, talking very local transactions. What do you think for a Proptech startup you need to achieve in order to create this escape velocity, so that you are basically having this defensibility and say, like, listen, this is now my market and no one is freaking entering because I am the authority and I am the go-to solution for this specific persona, ICP, however you want to call it.
What you call defensibility, I call it a pathway to profitability. And with profitability being the end destination, I believe that too many owner founders, startups, even scale ups have read too many Silicon Valley books, which says, let's come up with an idea and let's go for funding. And then by definition, we have to do Series A, Series B, Series C, and onwards you go. And so thus I've seen companies any kind of company, any tech company, just exist about raising funding. And the crazy part about that is there are people out there who will give you money for a bad idea. And there are tech companies that exist only around soaking up funding. Good news stories that we're going to give to investors, and we're going to look. I'm sure behind closed doors, they don't sit there and go, this is fun, because funding is the worst part, in my experience, of running a prop tech company. The companies who I think do better are the ones who identify the fastest pathway to profitability. And by the way, that might not be with your MVP. That might not be with the product that you're pushing out there. That might be with something else that you don't want to build, but you have to build because your MVP or your USP, if you call it your unique sales proposition, which you then intend on selling. This one, the actual real product might have more profitability in it, but you're never going to get into a door and never be able to fund yourself unless you do something that is commercially viable. Let's go with that. And I can call out particular industries. Climate. I see this all the time. I see great climate tech. But no one, and we have all of these VCs saying ESG, yeah, we're all for climate, we're going to do all of this stuff. But when push comes to shove and they're not commercially viable, those VCs are running for the hills. And you only have to go over their books to see that they don't fund something that's not commercially viable or is not bringing a reduction in operation or is good for their consumers. So there's a whole field of things there. But what I believe is if you are starting any kind of tech company, you need to consider it as a business. Now, let's say I want to start Greasy Pete's Fish and Chip Shop, which by the way is a bad name, but I want to start that. I initially consider a whole heap of things in the area like demographics. Am I looking at my business plan? Are people really interested in fish and chips in the area? Does this product fit the market? Is the lease on this store okay? What are my operational costs? What are my utilities? How much rent am I paying per week? You should be doing a business plan where you go, this is what works out. But a lot of prop tech owners just jump in and go, here's a concept and I'm going to grow it. And they don't consider whether on the open market there is actually a play to grow it and whether that play will get them a pathway to profitability, or whether they need to do something else in order to unlock that secondary part of their business. So when it comes to defensibility, that's a holistic, that needs to be considered by anyone in the space.
Regarding let's say, your space within Reach, we can segment it across technologies, across use cases, across, as you said, industries. Where do you think right now is the hottest segment? Is blockchain still a thing at the moment? Is everything running towards AI, some hardware solutions? Because obviously, we talk property tech construction. What is there? Is there any element where you can say, okay, we have like this segmentation?
No. No, in easy answer to your question is no. There's no segment I'd point to and go, this is one above the other. And that's crazy when you consider the noise that's been made around, let's call it generative AI as opposed to existing artificial intelligence. When you consider the noise that's been made around that, and the best ideas that are coming through are still, they have one trait, and that is they are innovative, or they are replacing, they might be replacing existing function. They could be new, but they're innovative and they are filling a need in the market. Let's call it that. But they could be, there's some great blockchain products out there. There are some great generative AI products. There are products that just exist, without the fuss, without the generative AI. They might be incorporating elements of that into their software or into their product, but overall, I can't point to one and say, look, this is more disruptive, or this is better, or this is a hotspot that is coming forward. I think I know the industry likes to look for things like that. I know generally, especially as an investor, we look to, can I identify a thread there? But I think if anything, it's more confusing now than it ever was before, because you've got everybody shouting that they've got generative AI. And let me talk about a problem in that area that I don't think VCs are looking at, is they're not actually assessing how much of the product and how much of the generative AI that's been sold to you as part of the solution is actually theirs, as opposed to a bolt-on. I call it promptware. The amount of promptware that is sitting on my desk at the moment, where somebody has gone, I've got a great idea. Well, that's not your idea. You've written a sophisticated prompt, which might be great in its own right. I'm not bagging it, but you've written a sophisticated prompt. You're using the OpenAI architecture to deliver that prompt. What software am I buying? How disruptable is that? Does it have longevity? What happens if OpenAI turns off access? And all of these things need to be considered. Like it's actually a higher risk margin than it ever was before for VCs, because if you come to me and you say, I've got artificial intelligence, let's just say a broad thing, that's what people are saying to me. I will interrogate that to the nth degree. I will find out exactly what artificial intelligence you have, whether it's proprietary, whether it's you borrowed the code from somewhere else, whether you are plugging into another engine. There is more risk these days associated with investing in software that doesn't actually belong to the person who is approaching you than ever before.
A rapper sold in a very nice way of ChatGPT and some other APIs and buying the data from a scraper, which that also again uses the same LLM, which actually also then all the other people can also build. Is that then again defensible? And what am I buying into?
We're seeing it in everything. Somebody sold a track that wasn't written by Drake that had his name on it. So, if we're seeing it in rappers or singers or artists, we're going to see it across the board.
Coming to the element, and as you said very well, in my opinion, in the beginning, networks, relationships, shaking hands, and I would call it intangibles, maybe, which you see somewhere in the balance sheet of a company and say, hey, this guy is very well connected. Like, this is maybe nowadays more of a value when you talk to a founder than someone who has written 1,000 lines of code. Do you take those elements into consideration as well? And do you even think maybe that those elements play a greater role because the tendency to hide behind the code is stronger and more apparent than ever?
Yes, there's a lot of factors in there. I'm firmly of the belief that there's a quite a defined hierarchy to starting a Proptech startup, and there are elements that need to be there, and technology is one of them. An ability to sell or an ability to network and form relationships is another. And generally, you find that the person who has written the code is unlikely to be the salesperson or the person starting the relationships, and that's because we're all wired differently. I'm not so good at code, but I believe I'm excellent at communication, networking, forming relationships. So, I will never be that other person, just the same as a lot of the best CTOs I've met will never be the person on the front line. And they shouldn't, in my opinion. It's very rare that you will find one that does both. And there are other parts too. There's the visionary part of a Proptech, and how are you going to develop beyond what you have already developed? What's your R&D look like? How are you moving forward? So there are so many parts that we do look at. If I had to boil it down, Michael, in all honesty, in my old age, if you want to call it that, but with 28 odd years of experience in this industry and very passionate about the industry, I feel that the most overriding thing when it comes to investing in anything, whether it's a business, a technology, a property technology, are the people that sit behind it. If I can draw a common thread with every single successful company that's been there, and even I think if you were to analyze that period of success, so the 5 years that they were running hot, that will generally be based on the people that sit behind it or the culture of the team that sit behind it. If you want to look at a scale up and then onto an enterprise company, and the larger you get, the more difficult that is to maintain. And you hear big CEOs like Google and X and all the others that are out, Microsoft, they talk about trying to instill culture in their company, because it's the biggest battle when you get to that size is to how do we still make it like everyone doesn't feel like they're number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and they are operating a job like a robot. Now in startups and scale-ups, you have the ability to instill that culture, and therefore it becomes more about the team and the people that are behind a product than necessarily a product. I have seen really poor products absolutely destroy great product based on the people that sit behind the product.
It is also therefore probably super important for you to vet the team and to make sure that they have a clean sheet, because every once you have the big hit, the billion-dollar exit, there's going to be the naysayers, the jealous people, whatsoever. They try to go and dig into the history of the company and find something. So I believe, or maybe prove me wrong there from an investor's point of view, making sure that the person is ethically, morally okay, has a good track record, and is basically also, we can bet on the person that he or she acts out of integrity. Is that a thing which plays a role?
Yeah, it's a consideration. I mean, it's very, speaking frankly, it's very hard to invest in, let's say, a technology company where the owner is going through divorce because you don't know what part of that's his. And we're seeing at the moment, like in answer to your question, you've seen the CEO that attended the Coldplay concert, with his mistress and got busted on the Jumbotron, I think they call it in America. We're seeing just today, there's a CEO who ripped a hat off a kid at a tennis ball tournament. We're seeing CEOs everywhere with poor behavior. So, I don't think there's any amount of digging that can adequately prepare you for life. And that's a large portion of what we do in our program is we make sure that it's not just about the technology, but we're actually providing these owner founders with tips to get their mental health and well-being and their own relationships and their priorities right. As far as I know, we're one of the only accelerators that strongly focus on that. We actually bring in people who are broken in the process to discuss what that felt like, what the symptoms were like, to identify if there are problems, moving through. And so, whether somebody is going to make a poor judge, be a poor judge of character or make a mistake along the way, I can't adequately prepare for that. Yes, I might profile a person and that might give me some kind of indication as to what that judgment is like or has been like in the past. But, even the best of us can make poor decisions at times, and that will lead to either the success or might lead to damage in the companies that are there. The one thing I'd say is if you're a technology owner or a founder out there, your company is only as strong as the weakest link. And so if you're slugging away doing 20-hour days to try and keep your company alive, you will break, and your company won't be better for it. They won't. There won't be somebody left to pick up the pieces. So if you're in that scenario at the moment, there is plenty of help out there. You need to get yourself in front of an accountability partner that will say to you, you need to take a holiday or you need to take a break. Don't think that the company is going to fall over. There may be things that happen, but it will fall over harder if you break. So I've heard all of the excuses for this, but the most important part of keeping a property technology company on track is actually making sure that the owners, the founders of the group and the operators are all in a state of peak performance, just like an athlete coming into an NFL game or an NBA game.
Secondary ventures and reach, what's the plan for each startup? Is it follow-up rounds? Do you do the first round and say we make sure our startups go through a very strong accelerator and we prepare them for the real investors? What's the idea? And also maybe the hope for an exit. Is there a timeline, 3 to 5 years towards IPO? Or is it always case by case, a different decision, a different idea?
You've been in a class. Do you remember back to high school, going through a class, whether that's an English class or a math class? We basically run a class is in layman's terms. And so when it comes to venture capital, the better VCs I've ever seen never cut a massive check up front. If somebody is cutting a massive check up front, it almost says to me, I want hostile takeover. I want a position in this company. And that may happen and that may be the right move for your Proptech. I'm not saying that's not the way forward. But most VCs, especially industry-related VCs, which is what we are, will cut you a smaller check up front and then they'll see how you do with that money, how you move forward, and then they will look to invest beyond that. And that's very, very, very much what Reach executes on behalf of Second Century Ventures. So you can always apply for follow-up funding. What we want to see is what kind of steward have you been with the money that we've given you to start off with? Have you executed the things that you said you were going to do? Have you provided regular updates as to here is our momentum moving forward? What are you going to do with the money? There's so many things, and another lesson for PropTech companies is if you're asking for money, you better well have a great idea of how that money is going to be spent. Just don't come to me and say we're raising 4 million and go, what are you going to spend it on? I don't know, stuff. We're just going to spend it on stuff. Great. All the best with that, because if I can't see that, this is where the money goes missing, is that we have these huge checks cut, 8, 10 million, $20 million. And the owners are living like kings. They're now flying first class everywhere. They're hosting parties at their own house. How much of that money has been spent back inside the property technology company in actual growth? And I'm sure there are arguments to be made of, I was wining and dining the prince of some kind of far-flung company, and therefore I had to put on gold-plated glasses and whatever else. But how you actually spend the money is probably or how you say you're going to spend the money, and then what you do with it is one of the most important parts of follow-up funding. And it's a great strategy, because if we cut you a small check and you execute and you do every single thing that we have asked, or not necessarily that we've asked, but you move your company forward in the direction that you said you were going to do in tandem with us, we will look at the second round of funding and go, you know what, cutting a check for these guys the second time around is not all of that. It's not all that hard to see that they're going to do the same thing again, and they're very invested in growing. So the second part to that, you asked about exits, and look, we carry some kind of ridiculous stat. I don't know it off the top of the head, but what does an exit look like to a PropTech founder? Well, it's all very different. An exit could be, I have been absorbed by a larger company and I've gotten money back from that. Like, generally it involves money, if I'm honest. We're not here for charities. We may be here to change the world, but generally everyone that gets involved in a property technology company is looking at it from a business perspective, or wants to look at it from a business perspective where they make money out of it. So what does a successful exit look like can be different to everybody. So rather than track, look, exits, all of our exits have been for multi-million dollars worth of money, we look at our exits from a positive standpoint or a negative standpoint. Was it positive for the owner founder or the people that were involved? Was it negative? Do they feel like they didn't get anything out of that? They didn't learn anything? They didn't move forward? They haven't been remunerated for the time that they spent in that particular area? It can be dependent on market cycles. It can be dependent on whether the product that you had still has any value today. Like, I have seen products that wrote copywriting prior to November 2022. I've seen products that had copywriting strategies just disappear overnight because ChatGPT came out, Gemini came out, Copilot, all of those, and most real estate agents are now writing copy. So before that, we had a slew of companies, not within the Reach portfolio, but there were a slew of companies that actually wrote copy, and they've all disappeared, and that's as a result of market conditions. There's a new player on the block. It's going to garner the market share in that area. So I guess what I'm saying in a long-winded way around is that most of our companies that we touch in some way or a part of the Reach program, they will have themselves a positive experience when it comes to exit. And what that is varying degrees depending on who you are, the size of your company at that particular time.
What's the minimum check, or do you do it like a Y Combinator or other programs where you say it's 50K, it's 100K, it's a certain amount, and that's what you get?
Yeah, I'd prefer not to discuss that, because that's different for all Reach portfolios. Like what we have here in Australia is different for Reach commercial, and it's different depending on geographical areas. So in the Latin American area, it's different. It's different across the board. But like suffice to say, we're not cutting large checks at the front. Is probably where I will leave that. But that's generally up to the managing partners of each of the regions as to how much. And on that, how you shape a class is very different. So I might be issuing more money to companies I think are going to need that and can actually use that to dial a needle for their technologies. I might be issuing less to higher risk companies that perhaps are at earlier stage, but I think is a great concept and something that the industry actually needs. And here's the other one, unlikely to get funding from other sources. So, how we shape a class or a cohort of companies is generally up to the managing partners of the region. And we have some excellent managing partners, and all of them understand our regions back to front. So, it's not going to be up to me to tell Carlos in Latin America how to shape his portfolio, because Carlos lives and breathes Latin America. I'm a dumbass Australian, so I'm not going to tell him how to run his cohort, and I'm not going to tell Ashley in the US how to run hers, or Lynette in Canada, or I don't know anything about Israel and the Middle East, and we have cohorts of companies over there. So definitely that comes down to the managing partners for those areas, and they are experts in their own rights.
Where do you see the most disruptive technologies right now happening in Proptech? Do you think there's something which, again, I'm mentioning hardware maybe, because we all talk right now about AI and we can imagine it. Is there something like happening in hardware, which is, I don't know, like the newest drone and or 3D printing and stuff? What's happening in this space?
I have seen a lot of hardware come forward. If I could isolate an industry, so here in Australia, we consider prop tech to include construction tech. I don't know if that's a commonly held view across multiple geographical areas. I've never really canvassed that idea, but I'm definitely seeing an uptick in construction tech. If you look at the cycles that fintech, prop tech, and construction tech move in, fintech is invariably 10 or 15 years ahead of prop tech. By default, that's my belief. They're getting more money from banks and major funding providers, and they're gobbled up very quickly if they've got a great idea. In prop tech, we sort of sit 10 to 15 years behind it, depending on the area. And we've accelerated forward in the last decade. Prop tech really went through a boom. The next one I consider to go through a boom would be construction tech. And if you look at construction tech, just as a minimum, there are still builders out there who are still writing paper contracts. If you compare that with anyone in the real estate game who's been using DocuSign for 15 years or longer, but for us to get through COVID and still have an industry where it's not digitized yet in a meaningful way, and that's across the board. Yeah, I know the big players are probably doing it right, but to look at an area, construction tech, even the volume of construction tech that have hit us or hit my desk, looking for homes, and some of that is hardware. Michael, some of that is hardware. I'm definitely seeing an uptick in that area, but the volume that has hit my desk is higher. I would have to say I'm expecting more IoT technology to come into the home. If you look at the commercial area, asset management facilities, they have very, very sophisticated IoTs to the extent that they have digital twins through houses. I fully expect the human home to be very, very similar to that. We're already going down that road. We've got automated vacuum cleaners these days. Most of our appliances will connect in an IoT way. Why are our homes not digital twins at this stage? And, we're seeing some players in that market, but I would expect an increase in IoT-based hardware that actually has some kind of connectivity to one of the big four, like Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft. They all have smart home areas. So I'm expecting to see a lot of that enter the prop tech space in the next 5 years.
Peter, thank you so much for your time today. You taught us a lot with the start, with the entire career, with the success with your company, growing it to multi-million users. I think it's phenomenal. It's impressive. You gave us a very nice understanding of how you achieved it to grow it globally so successfully and so fast. You gave us a very nice overview of the entire REACH program, and I really appreciate your time and also your emphasis on helping us understand the way you guys work, your mindset, your approach, your also values, which you definitely implicitly conveyed in a very meaningful way, at least to me. I really enjoyed you giving us a very nice overview of the entire program, and also in the end how you are shaping the entire industry, not only you yourself but the entire program along the Proptech industry. Finally, you gave us a lot of good insights regarding the next wave regarding Proptech, and concluding with the smart homes and the IoT technology. Is there anything else you would like to mention to the audience which we haven't touched upon?
Probably just a message of support and encouragement. Like if you're a Proptech owner or founder out there, life is a lonely place. I'm well aware of that. And I think, not to harp on the benefits of Reach or a community, but it's one of the unwritten benefits in my opinion. But if you've built something and you're proud of it, congratulations. Not many people will tell you that, but you should be proud of what you've built. You should, or never die wondering. You guys are innovators in the scene, and the world needs people like you to keep creating, to keep innovating, to keep questioning what's the status quo that we have at the moment. So if you're listening to this, if you've made it all the way through to the end and you're still listening to a middle-aged white guy bang on about property technology, well done to you. And I wish you all the best for the future. If there's any questions that I might be able to answer, please feel free to reach out. And I wish you all the best on future success and the building of your companies moving forward.
Perfect. How can people reach out to you, Peter?
Probably best, I have social media channels. I've got a ridiculously long last name that I think will be on here in some weird way. There is only one of me, I believe, in the world with a name like this. So you can find me pretty easily on most social channels. Don't operate on Tinder, so you won't find me on that. But you'll find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, X, Instagram, all of the others. Otherwise, there's plenty of contact points at our website, reachanz.com. You can reach out to me on any of those, but I'm fairly responsive to social media channels, as you would be aware, Michael.
Perfect. I definitely am. Thank you so much, Peter. Have a good day. And yeah, I'm about to go to sleep. So sending the best regards to Australia. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. And thanks for staying up late to do this.
Of course. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
This video is brought to you by HalloCasa. Our tool transforms independent local real estate agents to global real estate agents. Create your own profile for free and get contacted by international investors. Sign up with the link in the description.